Welcome to Crime Chronicles Confidential, where we uncover the darkest, most twisted true crime stories. Stories that shake the very core of trust, love, and loyalty. Here, we don't just tell crime stories. We take you deep inside them, unraveling secrets, exposing lies, and revealing the chilling realities hidden behind ordinary lives. Every case we bring to you is more than just a crime. It's a journey into the mind of those who deceive, betray, and destroy the ones who trust them the most. Tonight, we bring you a story that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about love and loyalty. A tale of devotion turned deception, of innocence masking pure evil. This is a tragic case of Sam Abraham, a man who built his life around a woman he had loved since childhood, never knowing that behind her soft smile lurked a dark, twisted mind. He trusted her with his heart, his home, and his future. But what he didn't know was that the woman sleeping next to him, the mother of his child, was secretly plotting his murder. A loving marriage, a perfect family, and a happy life in Australia. On the surface, it was everything a man could dream of. But beneath that illusion, a storm was brewing. A betrayal so deep, so calculated, that it would shock even the most seasoned detectives. One night, Sam went to sleep and never woke up. At first, it seemed like fate had dealt an unfortunate hand. Another tragic case of a sudden heart attack. But fate had nothing to do with what happened. Hidden in the shadows of grief and mourning was a chilling truth. A crime so meticulously planned that no one suspected a thing. Until one mistake unraveled everything. How did a love story turn into a horrifying crime? What led Sophia, the woman Sam had loved for years, to commit such an unforgivable act? And how did the truth finally come to light? Tonight, we take you inside one of the most shocking cases of betrayal and murder. A crime buried under layers of deception, but one that proves no secret stays hidden forever. Stay with us as we uncover the shocking truth behind the case of Sam Abraham. Sam Abraham and Sophia had a love story that seemed straight out of a fairy tale. They grew up together in the same village, their childhoods intertwined like the roots of an old tree. They were best friends before they even knew what love meant. Every Sunday, they would meet at church, singing hymns together, sharing whispered dreams about the future. As the years passed, their bond deepened, transforming into a love so pure that nothing seemed strong enough to break it. Sam was a kind and gentle soul, someone who saw the world with hope and goodness. Sophia, with her soft-spoken nature and affectionate words, was the perfect match for him, or so he thought. They made promises to each other, vows of lifelong commitment, dreams of building a future together. Against all odds, they overcame family opposition and societal expectations to turn their love into marriage. To Sam, their love was sacred, unshakable. But love, no matter how pure, can sometimes be an illusion, and trust, once broken, turns into the sharpest weapon of betrayal. As Sam worked tirelessly to provide a comfortable life for Sophia and their son in Australia, he never saw the shadows creeping into his home. He never noticed how the warmth in Sophia's eyes had turned cold. He never suspected that the woman he had loved since childhood was slowly slipping away from him. Behind the walls of their home, behind the laughter and everyday routine, something sinister was taking shape. A hidden desire, a dangerous secret, a plan that would change everything. What Sam didn't realize was that the woman he had trusted with his life no longer saw him as her future. He was no longer the man she dreamed of spending her life with. In the depths of her heart, something had changed, something dark, something ruthless. What happens when love turns into an illusion? When the person you trust the most becomes the one planning your downfall? This was no longer a story of childhood love. It was the beginning of a nightmare that Sam Abraham never saw coming. Sam Abraham and Sophia's story began in the narrow lanes of their childhood village, where innocence still painted the world in bright colors. They were neighbors, growing up side by side, their laughter echoing through the streets, their dreams woven together in whispered conversations under the shade of old trees. Every Sunday, they would meet at church, their voices blending in harmony as they sang hymns with the choir. Sam had a deep love for music, and Sophia shared that passion. It was in these quiet moments, between melodies and stolen glances, that their bond deepened. They understood each other in ways no one else could. As they grew older, their friendship transformed into something more. Love, soft and unspoken at first, bloomed between them. They were inseparable, their connection so natural that even their families assumed they would one day be together. But love is never without obstacles. When it was time for higher studies, life took them down different paths. Sam moved to Tamil Nadu to pursue his MBA, while Sophia continued her studies in Kerala. The distance between them grew, but their hearts remained connected. They promised each other that no matter where life took them, they would find their way back to one another. And they did. After completing their education, they reunited, stronger than ever. Sam, now working in a prestigious financial institution, had built a stable life. Sophia, too, had secured a job in the IT sector. They were ready to turn their long-standing love into a lifelong commitment. But fate had other plans. Sam's family, especially his father, did not approve of the marriage. He believed Sophia wasn't the right match for their son. She came from a respected family, her father a retired defense officer, but something about her unsettled them. Sophia, determined not to lose Sam, took matters into her own hands. She met his family, spoke to them with respect, and assured them of her love. Slowly, she won them over, especially Sam's mother, who saw the sincerity in her words. And so, after years of waiting, struggling, and proving their love, Sam and Sophia finally became husband and wife in 2008. Their wedding was a celebration of triumph, of love that had endured the test of time. They believed they had conquered all odds. What they didn't know was that the greatest battle was yet to come, because sometimes love does not fade in a single moment. It erodes slowly, like waves against a rock, until one day, nothing is left but a haunting silence. And in that silence, betrayal begins to whisper. Sam Abraham and Sophia's love had weathered the test of time, but their biggest challenge was yet to come, the battle for acceptance. Sam's family had always been traditional, deeply rooted in their values and expectations. When he finally gathered the courage to tell them about his relationship with Sophia, he had expected resistance, but he wasn't prepared for the intensity of their disapproval. His father was the first to reject the idea outright. "This girl, she is not meant for our family," he had said with finality. "You need to think carefully about your future, Sam. Love is not everything." For the first time in his life, Sam felt the weight of his family's expectations crushing down on him. He had always been an obedient son, one who never went against his father's wishes. But this was different. This was love, his love, and he was not willing to let it go. Sophia, on the other hand, faced a different kind of struggle. Her family, proud and respected in the community, expected her to settle down with a man who matched their social standing. Her father, a retired defense officer, was a strict man who had always believed in discipline and order. When Sophia told her parents about Sam, they were hesitant. "You've known him since childhood, but that doesn't mean he's the right man for you," her mother had said. Love is one thing, but marriage is different. The word stung, but Sophia refused to back down. Sam and Sophia knew they had to fight for their love. They pleaded, they reasoned, they tried to convince their families in every way possible. But nothing seemed to work. Sam's father remained firm in his decision, convinced that Sophia was not the right choice. Desperate and frustrated, Sam made the hardest decision of his life. "If you can't accept the woman I love, I will leave this house," he told his parents one evening. His voice was steady, but his heart was breaking. His mother gasped in shock, her eyes brimming with tears. His father remained silent, but his face darkened with anger. For days, the house was filled with tension. No one spoke about it, but the weight of Sam's words lingered in the air. His mother, torn between her husband and her son, finally decided to take matters into her own hands. She met Sophia in secret. What she saw in Sophia was not arrogance or defiance. It was love. Love for her son. Love that was pure, unwavering, and willing to endure anything. Sophia spoke with quiet determination, her voice steady but her eyes filled with emotion. I love Sam, Ani. I always have. And I promise you, I will never let him down. I will respect this family. I will care for him. I will do everything in my power to make him happy. Sam's mother was silent for a long time. Then, without a word, she took Sophia's hands in hers. A small gesture, but in that moment everything changed. Days later, she convinced Sam's father to reconsider. She told him about her meeting with Sophia, about the sincerity in her words, about the love she saw in her eyes. Perhaps we are wrong, she whispered to him that night. Perhaps she is exactly what our son needs. It wasn't easy, but slowly, Sam's father relented. He didn't openly welcome Sophia, but he no longer opposed the marriage. And for Sam, that was enough. When the day of their wedding arrived, it was a bittersweet moment. Sam's father attended, but his expression remained unreadable. His mother, however, stood by his side, her silent support a source of comfort. Sophia's family, too, had their reservations, but they put them aside for their daughter's happiness. It was a victory, one that had taken years of patience, persistence, and love. Sam and Sophia believed that they had conquered all obstacles, that they had proved their love was strong enough to overcome anything. But they didn't know that the greatest betrayal comes not from strangers, but from the ones we fight for the most. And for Sam, the greatest battle was still waiting in the shadows. For Sam Abraham, moving to Australia was the beginning of a dream, one that he had built with the woman he loved since childhood. After years of struggle, of proving their love against family opposition, of building careers and finding their place in the world, Sam and Sophia had finally created the life they had always imagined. A life filled with stability, success, and above all, happiness. From the outside, their marriage seemed perfect. They lived in a beautiful home in Epping, Australia. Sam worked hard, providing for his wife and their young son, while Sophia also pursued her career in the IT sector. They had friends, weekend outings, and a routine that reflected everything a couple could want, a peaceful, loving home. But was it really love, or was it all just an illusion? As the years passed, small cracks began to appear in their perfect world. Cracks that only Sam seemed to notice. Sophia had changed. She was no longer the warm, affectionate woman he had fought so hard for. There were moments when she seemed distant, lost in thoughts she never shared. She started coming home late, making excuses that never quite added up. Sam, a man who believed in trust, tried to ignore his doubts. She's just busy with work, he would tell himself. Stress can make people behave differently, but in his heart, a quiet unease had begun to settle. Then came the whispers, the hushed phone calls that would end the moment he entered the room, the messages she would quickly delete, the times she would leave without explanation. Sam tried to confront her, but every time he brought it up, she would brush it aside with a reassuring smile. "You're overthinking, Sam," she would say, laughing softly. "Everything is fine." And for a while, he wanted to believe her. After all, hadn't they been through so much together? Hadn't they fought the world to be with each other? There was no way she would betray him. But love, once tainted by doubt, can never truly be the same. The happy life they had built now felt like a house made of glass, fragile, waiting to shatter. And Sam, unknowingly, was already standing on broken pieces. What he didn't know was that his life was no longer his own, that the woman he trusted with his heart had already made a decision, one that would soon take everything away from him. The illusion of a happy marriage was about to break, revealing the dark truth that had been lurking beneath it all along. At first, the changes in Sophia were subtle, so subtle that Sam barely noticed them. She was still the woman he had loved for years, the mother of his child, the wife who stood by his side through thick and thin. But something was different. She had grown distant. Her laughter no longer carried the same warmth. Conversations became shorter, her eyes distracted, as if her mind was somewhere else. She spent more time on her phone, texting late into the night, smiling at messages Sam never saw. He tried not to overthink it. She's busy, he told himself. Work stress. It happens. But then, the excuses began. She started coming home later than usual. At first, she would mention extra hours at work, a demanding project, or a last-minute meeting. But soon, the explanation stopped altogether. She would leave without telling him where she was going. And when she returned, her perfume smelled different. Her phone was kept face down, and her gaze avoided his. One night, as Sam lay awake beside her, he glanced at her sleeping form, wondering where she had been earlier. Was he imagining things? Was he just being paranoid? But deep inside, a voice whispered, "Something is wrong." Then came the silences. They used to talk for hours about their future, their son, their dreams. But now, Sophia barely spoke. If Sam asked her anything, she would respond in short, clipped answers, her tone laced with irritation. The warmth was gone, replaced by coldness he didn't understand. And then, the biggest change of all, her intimacy with him faded. There were nights when Sam reached out for her, seeking the closeness they once shared, but she would turn away. She would claim she was tired, or not feeling well, or simply uninterested. And every rejection felt like a slap, a slow realization that the woman he loved was slipping away from him. But slipping away to where? And to whom? Sam began noticing other things. Money disappearing from their accounts, her sudden interest in expensive clothes, new jewelry he hadn't bought for her. When he asked, she would shrug and say, "Just treating myself." But Sophia had never been materialistic before. His unease grew, and yet he held on to hope. Maybe it's just a phase, he convinced himself. Maybe she just needs space. But he had no idea that the space she was creating was not just emotional. It was physical. Sophia was living a life he knew nothing about. She had built walls around herself, keeping secrets locked away behind them. And Sam, the man who had loved her unconditionally, was now just an outsider in his own home. The woman he had fought for, the woman he had trusted, was no longer his. He just didn't know it yet. On a cool October evening in 2015, Sam Abraham stood in the courtyard of his family home in Kerala, surrounded by loved ones. The air was filled with warmth, the chatter of relatives, the aroma of home-cooked meals, and the bittersweet emotions that always came with saying goodbye. It was the end of their annual visit to India. As was their tradition, Sam, Sophia, and their son had spent 2 weeks with family, reconnecting with their roots before returning to their life in Australia. But this time, something was different. Sam was unusually quiet. His usual enthusiasm about returning home seemed to be missing. There was a strange sadness in his eyes, as if an unseen weight pressed upon him. As he embraced his father one last time, he hesitated, then spoke in a tone that sent chills through the old man's spine. "Pray that I return alive, because next time I might come back in a coffin." His father frowned, holding his son's arms tightly. "What are you saying, Sam? Don't speak like that." Sam forced a smile, shaking his head. "Just a thought, Appa. Nothing serious." But the words lingered in the air, unsettling everyone who heard them. 3 days later, they arrived back in Australia. The long journey had exhausted them, and after a quiet dinner, they settled in for the night. That was the last time Sam Abraham would ever close his eyes. The next morning, Sophia woke up early as usual. She moved about the kitchen, preparing coffee, the routine of a normal day unfolding. But when she went to wake Sam, she found him completely still. She shook him lightly. "Sam?" No response. Her heartbeat quickened. She shook him harder, her voice rising in panic. "Sam, wake up!" But he didn't move. His body lay motionless, his face eerily peaceful, as if he had simply drifted away in his sleep. Tears filled her eyes as she cried out, her screams echoing through the house. The neighbors rushed in. An ambulance was called. The paramedics arrived, checked his pulse, and then looked at each other before delivering the words that would change everything. "He's gone." Sophia collapsed to the floor, wailing uncontrollably. Their son stood in the corner, confused, staring at his father's lifeless body. The news reached Kerala like a storm. When Sam's father heard the words, he clutched his chest as if struck by an invisible blow. His son, the boy he had raised, the man he had embraced just days ago, was gone. And then, like a ghost from the past, Sam's own words came back to haunt him. "I might come back in a coffin." A deep, indescribable sorrow settled over the family. The grief was unbearable, but beneath it, an unease began to grow. Because sometimes the dead speak before they leave, and Sam Abraham had spoken. The question was, had anyone truly listened? It was an ordinary night, a night like any other. Sam Abraham returned home after a long day, exhausted but content. His son was playing in the living room, and Sophia was in the kitchen, preparing dinner. The scent of freshly cooked food filled the air, and for a moment, everything felt peaceful, like a normal family living a normal life. At the dinner table, Sam spoke about their recent trip to India, about how much he missed his parents, and about how he wanted to visit them again soon. Sophia listened, nodding occasionally, her face unreadable. After dinner, Sam stretched his arms and let out a deep sigh. "I'm so tired today," he said with a small smile. "I think I'll sleep early." Sophia stood up. "I'll make you a drink before bed." She walked into the kitchen and opened the refrigerator. Her hands moved with precision, as if following a carefully rehearsed routine. She took out an avocado, peeled it, and blended it into a smooth milkshake. But this wasn't just an ordinary drink. Hidden within it were crushed sleeping pills, just enough to make sure that Sam would not wake up easily. She handed him the glass, watching him closely as he drank it without suspicion. "You always take care of me," he said softly, unaware that this would be the last thing he would ever say to her. Minutes later, his eyelids grew heavy. He yawned, rubbed his forehead, and walked toward the bedroom. "I'll put our son to sleep and join you soon," Sophia said, her voice calm, controlled. Sam barely nodded as he lay down. His body sank into the mattress, his breathing steady but slow. Within moments, he drifted into a deep, unnatural sleep. And then silence. Sophia stood at the doorway, watching him, waiting. The seconds stretched into minutes. Finally, she reached for her phone and sent a message. "It's time." A few minutes later, the front door creaked open. A shadow moved through the hallway. Arun Kamalasanan, Sophia's secret lover, stepped into the bedroom. Sam was unconscious, defenseless, unaware of the horror about to unfold. Arun whispered something to Sophia, and she nodded. They moved carefully, methodically. She walked back into the kitchen and returned with another glass, this time filled with orange juice laced with cyanide. Arun lifted Sam's head slightly, tilting his face toward the ceiling. Sophia brought the glass to his lips and poured the deadly liquid into his mouth. For a brief moment, nothing happened. Then, Sam's body convulsed violently. His breathing turned erratic. His fingers curled into tight fists, his face contorted in pain. And then, all movement stopped. The room fell into a deafening silence. Arun stepped back, his heart pounding, waiting for a sign of life. There was none. Sam Abraham was dead. Sophia exhaled slowly. There were no tears, no hesitation, just quiet acceptance. For a moment, they simply stood there, watching him. The man she had once loved. The man she had married. The man she had just murdered. Arun left soon after, slipping out into the night, leaving Sophia alone with her dead husband. She didn't sleep that night. Instead, she lay next to Sam's lifeless body, waiting for the morning, waiting for her act to begin. And when the sun finally rose, her screams echoed through the house. "Sam! Sam, wake up!" The performance had begun. Sophia's cries pierced through the quiet morning air. Her wails were raw, desperate, filled with the kind of agony only a grieving wife could feel. She clutched Sam's lifeless body, shaking him violently as if she could force life back into him. "Sam, wake up! Please wake up!" Tears streamed down her face as she rocked back and forth, screaming his name, her sobs echoing through the walls of their home. The neighbors heard the commotion and rushed inside. Their eyes widened at the sight. Sam, lying completely still on the bed, and Sophia, crumbling beside him in sheer devastation. One of them stepped forward cautiously. "What happened?" "He won't wake up," Sophia choked out between sobs. "He was fine last night. He just didn't wake up." The paramedics arrived within minutes. They checked Sam's pulse, their hands moving with clinical precision. One of them looked at Sophia, his expression unreadable. "I'm sorry, ma'am. He's gone." Sophia collapsed onto the floor, wailing uncontrollably. To everyone watching, it was the sight of a woman completely broken by grief. A wife who had just lost the love of her life. A mother who now had to explain to her child why his father would never wake up again. And yet, something felt off. Her tears were real, her shaking hands genuine. But the neighbors who had known her for years couldn't shake a strange feeling. Her grief was too perfect, too loud, too rehearsed. One of them later recalled how quickly Sophia had shifted from shock to complete hysteria, as if she was making sure everyone in the house knew how devastated she was. The paramedics found no signs of foul play. The cause of death appeared to be a sudden heart attack. Sam's body showed no external injuries, no signs of struggle. There was no reason to suspect anything was amiss. And yet, deep within the pit of his stomach, one of the medics couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. Perhaps it was the way Sophia glanced around the room between sobs, as if checking to see if people were watching. Perhaps it was the way she clung to Sam's body, but never quite touched his face. Perhaps it was the way her tears stopped just a little too quickly when the neighbors left. No one knew it yet, but this was not the breakdown of a grieving widow. This was a performance of a lifetime. At first, Sam Abraham's death seemed like a tragic but natural event. A healthy man in his mid-30s, suddenly passing away in his sleep. Everyone assumed it was a heart attack. His family in India, devastated by the news, mourned his loss, never questioning the truth behind his sudden departure. Even the police saw no immediate reason to investigate further. There were no signs of forced entry, no visible injuries, no apparent foul play. Sophia's grief appeared genuine, her cries of despair convincing enough to push aside any doubts. But sometimes the truth whispers before it screams. The first seed of suspicion was planted in the mind of a single police officer, someone who had seen enough crime scenes to know that things are not always as they seem. It wasn't a dramatic clue, not a clear-cut piece of evidence, just a feeling. Something about Sophia's reaction felt too rehearsed, too controlled beneath the hysteria. Then came the first real inconsistency. Sam had no history of heart problems. He was a healthy man, with no prior medical conditions that could explain such a sudden cardiac arrest. The second red flag came from Sam's father in India. Even in the depths of his grief, he couldn't forget Sam's last words before leaving for Australia. "Pray that I return alive, because next time I might come back in a coffin." Had his son known something was wrong? Had he sensed danger before he left? Still, these were just thoughts, small doubts that could easily be dismissed. But then, something happened that turned those doubts into full-blown suspicion. 3 days after Sam's death, as his body was being prepared for transport back to India for burial, an officer reviewing the case noticed something strange in the hospital reports. There was no clear cause of death listed. Heart attacks usually leave some indication. Clogged arteries, an enlarged heart, or at least minor warning signs. But in Sam's case, there was nothing. His heart was in perfect condition. That's when the officer made a decision that would change everything. He ordered an autopsy. Sophia, upon hearing this, did not react the way a grieving widow should have. She seemed startled, nervous. And then, something even stranger happened, just hours before the autopsy. Sophia suddenly demanded that Sam's body be released immediately and sent to India without any further examination. She made calls, pressured authorities, and insisted that her husband had died naturally, that there was no need for an autopsy. That was the moment the police knew. Something was terribly wrong. Sophia was trying to hide something, and whatever it was buried with Sam's body. What the police didn't know yet was that they were about to uncover a truth far darker than they could have imagined. When the police ordered an autopsy, they had a feeling something wasn't right. But even they weren't prepared for what they would find. As the medical examiners began their analysis, everything about Sam's body told a different story than the one Sophia had crafted. His heart was perfectly healthy. There were no signs of a cardiac arrest, no natural cause of death. But something far more sinister was lurking in his system. Then, the toxicology report arrived. Sam Abraham had not died in his sleep. He had been poisoned. Traces of cyanide were found in his bloodstream, a lethal dose strong enough to kill him within minutes. But that wasn't the only substance detected. There was another clue, a heavy dose of sedatives. The conclusion was chilling. Sam had been drugged before he was poisoned. The investigators pieced a puzzle together, reconstructing the night of his death. That evening, Sam had come home exhausted. He had dinner with his wife and son, unaware that it would be his last meal. At some point before he went to bed, Sophia handed him a drink, a milkshake perhaps, or a simple glass of juice. He drank it without suspicion, trusting the woman he had loved since childhood. What he didn't know was that the drink had been laced with sleeping pills. As the sedative took effect, his body grew weak, his mind clouded with drowsiness. He made his way to the bedroom, slipping under the covers, his movements slow and heavy. Within minutes, he was unconscious, too deep in sleep to wake up, no matter what happened next. And that was when the real plan began. With Sam lying defenseless, Sophia made a call. A few minutes later, a shadow moved through the house. Arun Kamalasanan, her secret lover. They stood over Sam's unconscious body, knowing he wouldn't fight back, knowing he was completely vulnerable. Sophia went into the kitchen and prepared one last drink. This time, an orange juice mixed with a deadly dose of cyanide. Arun lifted Sam's head slightly, his fingers digging into his lifeless shoulders. Sophia brought the glass to her husband's lips and tilted it gently, letting the poison slide down his throat. At first, nothing happened. Then, within seconds, Sam's body reacted. His muscles tensed, his fingers twitched, his breathing turned erratic. A violent spasm coursed through him as the poison took hold, attacking his nervous system, shutting down his organs. Then, stillness. It was over. Sophia and Arun stood in silence, watching as Sam's body grew lifeless. No remorse, no hesitation, just a quiet understanding between two people who had just ended a life. Arun slipped out of the house, disappearing into the night. Sophia, now alone, lay down beside her dead husband. She stayed there until morning, rehearsing the performance she would put on, the tears, the screams, the heartbreak. She knew that when the sun rose, she would play the role of a grieving widow. But what she didn't know was that the police were already closing in. The poison she thought had erased all evidence had, in reality, left behind the biggest clue of all. And soon, her perfect crime would come crashing down. Sophia thought she had planned the perfect crime. She believed that by the time anyone suspected foul play, Sam would already be buried, and his death would be nothing more than a tragic memory. But what she didn't realize was that secrets never stay buried forever. The first crack in her plan came when the autopsy report confirmed that Sam had been poisoned with cyanide, a substance so lethal that only a small amount was enough to kill him within minutes. The discovery sent shockwaves through the investigators. Sam had not died a natural death. He had been murdered. But the question remained: who had poisoned him, and why? The police knew they had to tread carefully. If Sam's murder was part of a bigger conspiracy, they needed to let the killer believe they were still in the dark. They decided to keep the toxicology report confidential. They did not inform the media, and they certainly didn't inform Sophia. Instead, they began a silent investigation, watching her every move, waiting for her to make a mistake. And she did. The first major red flag came when investigators reviewed Sam's financial records. Just days after his death, Sophia had made some unusual transactions. She transferred Sam's car to the name of a man no one in Sam's family had ever heard of, Arun Kamalasanan. That wasn't all. Within a few weeks, Sophia opened a joint bank account with this same man. And in a move that shocked even the investigators, she transferred all of Sam's savings into that account. Who was Arun Kamalasanan? And why was Sophia moving her dead husband's money into an account she shared with him? The police dug deeper. They traced Arun's phone records, his whereabouts before and after Sam's death, and his relationship with Sophia. What they found turned suspicion into certainty. Arun wasn't just a random acquaintance. He was Sophia's lover. And more than that, he had been in her life for far longer than anyone knew. Investigators uncovered hundreds of phone calls between Sophia and Arun in the months leading up to Sam's death. They spoke late at night, exchanged text messages, and even met in secret. One officer put it simply: this wasn't a grieving widow. This was a woman who had planned everything down to the last detail. Sophia's hidden life was unraveling before her eyes. Her grief was an act. Her tears were rehearsed. Her husband's death was no accident. And now, the police were closing in, but they needed one last piece of evidence, something that would connect Sophia and Arun directly to the murder. They decided to set a trap. They began tapping Sophia's calls, following her movements, and listening closely for any slip-up. And soon, the moment they had been waiting for arrived. Sophia, unaware that she was being monitored, made a fatal mistake. One call, one conversation, one careless word. And just like that, her darkest secret was about to be exposed to the world. Sophia had done everything she could to stage her husband's death as a natural tragedy. She had cried in front of everyone, played the role of the grieving widow, and convinced Sam's family that his passing was nothing but a cruel twist of fate. But what she didn't know was that the police had already begun watching her. The first signs of her deception came when investigators started tracking her financial transactions. Just days after Sam's funeral, Sophia made a suspicious move. She transferred ownership of Sam's car to a man named Arun Kamalasanan. This raised immediate red flags. Who was Arun? And why was Sophia handing over her late husband's belongings to him so soon after his death? Then came an even bigger shock: a joint bank account. Sophia had secretly opened a new account with Arun and transferred all of Sam's savings into it. The money that Sam had earned over years of hard work, money that was meant for their son's future, was now in an account controlled by Sophia and another man. This wasn't just financial mismanagement. This was premeditation. The police knew one thing: no grieving wife acts this way unless she has something to hide. But this was just the beginning. Sophia was meeting Arun in secret. Undercover officers tracked her movements. She would leave her house late at night, drive to quiet places, secluded parking lots, small cafes, parks where no one was around. Every time, Arun was waiting for her. They spoke in hushed voices. Their meetings were always brief, always careful. But no matter how cautious they were, they could not escape the watchful eyes of the investigators. The police needed one final piece of evidence before they could move in, and for that, they set a carefully crafted trap. Instead of confronting Sophia right away, the police decided to play the long game. They wanted her to feel safe, to believe that no one suspected her, because only then would she slip up. A surveillance team was assigned to watch every move she made. One team followed her physically, tracking her visits, her secret meetings, her interactions with Arun. Another team monitored her phone records, who she called, what she texted, and how often she was in touch with Arun. A third team dug into her past transactions, bank records, property ownership, and any hidden financial links between her and Arun. Weeks passed. Sophia had no idea that every step she took was being watched, recorded, and analyzed. Then came the breakthrough. One night, Sophia and Arun met in a secluded cafe. Investigators, disguised as customers, sat nearby. They listened, waiting for anything, that could directly implicate her. Then, in a low voice, Arun asked, "Are you sure we're safe?" Sophia sighed. "They don't suspect anything. The police think it was a heart attack." That was it. The confirmation they needed. The police had been waiting for one careless moment, one admission, one slip-up. And Sophia had just given it to them. Now, they were ready to strike. To truly understand why Sophia did what she did, the police had to dig deeper into her past. Who was she before she married Sam? Had she always been capable of deception? What they uncovered was a secret relationship that went back years before her marriage. Before Sophia married Sam, she had been in love with one man, Arun Kamalasanan. Their affair had started during her college years. They had been classmates, close friends, and eventually lovers. Arun was charming, ambitious, and manipulative. But when the time came for marriage, Sophia's family rejected Arun. She had no choice but to let him go. And shortly after, she rekindled her relationship with Sam, the man who had loved her since childhood. But her heart had never truly left Arun. Even after marrying Sam, even after having a child, Sophia kept in touch with Arun. Over the years, their meetings became more frequent. Their love never faded. And at some point, a dark idea took root. The only thing standing between them and a life together was Sam. That's when they began planning his murder. A murder disguised as fate. A crime so perfectly executed that, for a moment, it looked like they had succeeded. But no secret remains hidden forever. And Sophia's past, her love for Arun, her hidden desires, and her ultimate betrayal, was about to come crashing down. Sophia and Arun's love had never truly ended. It had only been paused, buried beneath the expectations of society and the obligations of marriage. But love, when mixed with obsession, turns into something far more dangerous. From the moment Sophia reconnected with Arun after marrying Sam, their relationship had rekindled like a hidden fire, burning in secret, growing stronger with every stolen moment. They met in quiet places, spoke in hushed tones, exchanged messages in the dead of night. Their love was no longer innocent. It was now built on deception and betrayal. Arun whispered promises into her ear, promises of a new life, a life free from the man she had married out of obligation. "What if we didn't have to hide anymore?" he had asked one night, his fingers brushing against hers. Sophia knew what he meant. She didn't ask questions. She didn't hesitate. They both knew there was only one obstacle standing in their way: Sam. Their love could not fully exist as long as he was alive. And so, they began to plan his murder. It wasn't a decision made in a moment of rage. No, it was calculated, premeditated, and carefully executed. Every detail was mapped out. The sleeping pills, the cyanide, the alibi. When Sam took his last breath that night, Sophia and Arun believed they had won. Finally, they could be together. Finally, they were free. But what they didn't know was that their so-called perfect crime was already beginning to fall apart. And one mistake, just one, would change everything. Sophia had planned every detail. Every move was carefully thought out, every reaction rehearsed. She cried at the right moments, played the grieving widow flawlessly, and ensured that Sam's death looked like nothing more than a tragic fate. But there was one thing she hadn't planned for: the persistence of the police. They had already started doubting the heart attack theory. The autopsy had proven cyanide poisoning, but what truly set the investigation in motion was Sophia's own actions. The police had been watching her closely. Her secret meetings, her financial transactions, her overly dramatic grief. Everything was being recorded. Then, she made the biggest mistake of all. During a routine questioning, an officer casually asked Sophia about the orange juice Sam had the night he died. It was a random question, meant to gauge her reaction. For a fraction of a second, Sophia froze. It was barely noticeable, but the officer saw it. A flicker of panic in her eyes, the hesitation before she answered. And then, she said something she would later regret. "I don't remember him drinking any juice that night." A simple sentence. But it was a lie. The investigators already knew about the orange juice laced with cyanide. They had found traces of it in the kitchen. They had uncovered the messages between Sophia and Arun discussing it. And now, they had proof that Sophia was hiding something. A crime that seemed flawless had begun to unravel. The cracks widened when Arun, under police surveillance, made one fatal mistake. He went to the same bar he always visited and had one drink too many. Feeling overconfident, untouchable, victorious, he spoke more freely than he should have. "She cried like a widow, but she knew exactly what we did," he muttered to a friend who, unknown to him, was an undercover officer. The police now had the final piece of the puzzle. Sophia and Arun had thought they had committed the perfect crime. But one mistake, one careless slip of the tongue, was all it took to bring their entire world crashing down. The police had all the evidence they needed, and now it was time for justice to be served. Sophia had always been meticulous, calculating, and patient. She knew that if she wanted a life with Arun, it wouldn't happen overnight. She needed a plan, a perfect, foolproof plan. For months, she carefully laid the groundwork. She ensured that Sam never suspected a thing. She played the role of a loving wife flawlessly, never letting her mask slip. But behind her soft smiles and affectionate words, she was orchestrating his death step by step. The first step was weakening his body. She began slipping small doses of sleeping pills into his food and drinks, just enough to make him feel exhausted, to make him believe that his constant fatigue was just work stress. It was all part of her strategy. She wanted his death to seem natural, gradual. Then came the final night. It was supposed to be like any other evening. Sam came home, had dinner with his family, and talked about their recent trip to India. He was tired, so he decided to go to bed early. That's when Sophia made her move. She handed him a drink, a simple, innocent-looking avocado milkshake. Sam took it without hesitation. He trusted her. Within minutes, the drug took effect. His limbs felt heavy, his mind clouded with exhaustion. He lay down in bed, unaware that he was falling into the deepest sleep of his life. And then Arun arrived. The man who had been Sophia's secret lover for years now stood in the shadows of Sam's bedroom, watching as he lay unconscious. They knew it was time. Sophia walked to the kitchen, took out a glass, and poured the final ingredient, the last piece of their sinister puzzle, orange juice laced with cyanide. She brought the glass to Sam's lips and tilted it gently, letting the deadly poison slide down his throat. He never even woke up. Within moments, his body convulsed. His breathing became erratic, foam formed at the corners of his mouth. And then stillness. Sam Abraham, the man who had loved Sophia since childhood, was gone. Sophia and Arun stood there, watching in silence. No guilt, no hesitation, just quiet acceptance of what they had done. Arun left shortly after, disappearing into the night. And Sophia? She calmly climbed into bed next to her husband's lifeless body, as if nothing had happened. She knew what she had to do next. When morning came, her performance would begin. She would become the grieving widow. She would cry, scream, and act as though her world had just shattered. And for a while, everyone would believe her, but not forever, because the truth, no matter how deeply buried, always finds a way to rise. Morning came, and with it, Sophia's greatest act. Her screams shattered the silence of the house. "Sam, wake up! Please wake up!" She clutched his lifeless body, shaking him violently, her sobs uncontrollable. She played her role perfectly. The devastated wife, the heartbroken mother, the woman who had just lost the love of her life. Neighbors rushed in. The paramedics arrived. The diagnosis was simple: heart attack. Sophia wept as if her soul had been torn apart. She held her son close, whispering, "Papa is gone," over and over again. For days, she continued her perfect performance. At the funeral, she collapsed with grief. In front of Sam's family, she cried until she could barely breathe. Everyone believed her. Everyone except for fate, because fate had other plans. It started with a single question. If it was a heart attack, why was there foam at the corners of his mouth? Then came the inconsistencies. Sophia refused an autopsy. Why? She moved on too quickly. Why? She transferred Sam's money into a joint account with another man. Why? And then, the biggest mistake of all, during a casual questioning by the police, Sophia was asked, "Did Sam have anything to drink before bed?" Without thinking, she replied, "No, nothing." A lie. A small, simple lie. But a lie that changed everything, because the police already knew about the orange juice. From that moment, the mask Sophia had so carefully crafted began to crack. The grieving widow was no longer just a widow. She was now a suspect. The truth was clawing its way to the surface. And soon, the woman who had built her entire life on lies, deception, and betrayal would finally face justice. Sophia thought she had committed the perfect crime. She believed that her tears, her carefully crafted grief, and her ability to control the narrative had fooled everyone. But what she didn't know was that the police were already several steps ahead. From the moment the toxicology report confirmed cyanide poisoning, the case had transformed from a natural death into a murder investigation. But the police knew that if they confronted Sophia directly, she would deny everything. They needed her to slip up. So they set a trap. Instead of arresting her immediately, they let her believe that she was in the clear. They allowed her to go about her daily life, to feel comfortable enough to let down her guard. Behind the scenes, however, an intense surveillance operation was underway. Magnifying glass still to left step 1, following Sophia's movements. A dedicated team tracked her every step, where she went, who she met, what she did. They saw her meeting with Arun in secret. They saw the way she smiled when she thought no one was watching, her demeanor completely different from that of a grieving widow. Telephone receiver step 2, tapping her phone calls. Every phone call she made was being monitored and recorded. They listened in as she reassured Arun, as she laughed softly, as she said things that no mourning wife should ever say. Bank step 3, investigating her finances. The bank records revealed everything. The card transferred to Arun. The money moved into their joint account. The police now had undeniable proof that Sam's death had been planned well in advance. But even with all this evidence, they needed a direct confession. And that's when fate intervened. Because while Sophia was careful, Arun was not. For months, Arun had lived under the belief that he had gotten away with murder. He had played his role perfectly. The hidden accomplice, the secret lover. But arrogance is a dangerous thing. One night, Arun walked into a bar, his usual place, where he often drank to unwind. What he didn't know was that an undercover officer was sitting just a few seats away, silently watching. As the drinks kept flowing, Arun's confidence grew. He leaned toward his friend, another regular at the bar, and with a smug smile he whispered, "She cried like a widow, but she knew exactly what we did." The undercover officer tensed. He had been waiting for a slip-up, for a careless word, and this was it. Arun, completely unaware of what he had just done, continued talking. "The police think it was a heart attack. They'll never figure it out." The officer excused himself quietly and left the bar. He didn't need to hear more. He already had what he came for. The moment he walked out, he made the call. "We got him. Moving now." Within hours, both Sophia and Arun were arrested. The woman who had faked her grief, who had built her crime on lies and deception, who had thought she had outsmarted everyone, was now sitting in an interrogation room. And this time, there was no escape, because the truth, no matter how well hidden, always finds its way to the surface. For months, the case had been unfolding like a complex puzzle, each piece leading closer to the undeniable truth. Sam Abraham had been murdered. The cyanide in his system, Sophia's hidden affair with Arun, the financial transactions, and Arun's drunken confession had already built a strong case against them. But the prosecution needed one final, undeniable piece of evidence, a piece that would remove all doubt. And that evidence was buried with Sam himself. The court granted permission for Sam's body to be exhumed from its resting place in Kerala. His family, devastated yet determined, stood by as investigators reopened the grave of a man whose death had been disguised as natural. When the forensic team examined his remains, the truth was confirmed once again. Cyanide poisoning had killed him. Traces of the poison were still detectable in his body, proving beyond any doubt that this was not a heart attack, not an accident, but a cold-blooded murder. This was the final blow. There was now no escape for Sophia and Arun, the widow who had played the role of a grieving wife, the lover who had planned every detail, the two people who thought they had executed the perfect crime. Their lies were finally exposed. The authorities wasted no time. The next step was inevitable. Sophia and Arun were arrested, and now they would face justice. The day Sophia was arrested, she was calm. She didn't cry, she didn't beg, she didn't scream. She simply lowered her head as officers placed handcuffs around her wrists. It was as if, deep inside, she knew this moment was coming. Arun, on the other hand, was in shock. "You can't do this. There's no proof," he shouted, even as the officers read him his rights. But there was proof, more than enough, and both of them knew it. Inside the courtroom, all eyes were on Sophia. She no longer looked like the confident, manipulative woman who had planned Sam's murder. She looked small, fragile, broken. But this was no longer her stage. This was no longer her performance. This was real. As the prosecution presented the chilling details of the case, the courtroom fell into an eerie silence. Red circled the poisoned drink. Red circled the staged grief. Red circled the bank transactions. Red circled the secret meetings. Red circled the final exhumation report confirming cyanide poisoning. And then the ultimate betrayal. Sam's own son was in the courtroom, too young to understand the depth of what his mother had done. A woman who was supposed to protect and love had instead destroyed her own family. When Sophia was asked if she had anything to say, she remained silent. She had spent years weaving a web of deception, but now there were no more lies left to tell. The verdict was about to be delivered. The courtroom was packed. The tension was unbearable. Then the judge spoke. The court finds Sophia and Arun guilty of the premeditated murder of Sam Abraham. The words hit like a thunderbolt. Sophia lowered her head, her hands trembling. Arun collapsed into his chair, the reality of his fate sinking in. The sentence was harsh and deserved. Red Circle Arun was sentenced to 27 years in prison without parole. Red Circle Sophia was sentenced to 22 years in prison. She begged for mercy, pleaded that she was a mother, that she had a child. But the judge's response was firm, final, and brutal. "It is better for the child that you are not with him." The court granted custody of Sam's son to his parents in India. Justice had been served. The perfect crime had failed. No matter how carefully they had planned it, no matter how well Sophia had played the grieving widow, the truth had won. Because in the end, no secret stays buried forever. As the courtroom doors closed behind Sophia and Arun, their once carefully planned future crumbled into nothing. Their dreams of a new life together had been replaced with the cold reality of prison walls, iron bars, and years of regret. But in the midst of all this, there was one innocent soul caught in the wreckage of their crime: Sam and Sophia's young son. A child too young to understand the depth of the betrayal. Too small to know that the mother who tucked him into bed at night was the same person who had taken his father away forever. With Sophia sentenced to 22 years in prison and Arun locked away for 27 years, the question arose: who would raise the child? Sophia's sister, who lived in Australia, petitioned for custody. She argued that the boy had already been living in the country, had his school and friends there, and that moving him away would be unfair. But Sam's parents, asterisk, the ones who had lost their only son in this brutal crime, asterisk, also fought for custody. They believed that their grandson should be raised with the love and care of his father's family, far away from the country where his mother had committed one of the most horrifying betrayals imaginable. The court had to decide: would the child stay in Australia with Sophia's family, or would he be sent to India to live with Sam's grieving parents? After weeks of legal proceedings, the final decision was made. The court ruled in favor of Sam's parents. The boy was taken to India, back to the family his father had loved so deeply. It was not the life he was meant to have. He was supposed to grow up with both parents in a loving home, filled with warmth and laughter. Instead, he grew up with questions. Why did his mother do this? Why was his father no longer here? And would he ever be able to escape the shadow of the crime that destroyed his family? One day, he would grow old enough to learn the truth. And when he did, he would have to live with the unbearable reality that his father had died at the hands of the woman who had given him life. A crime driven by love, a betrayal beyond forgiveness, and an innocent child left to carry the weight of a past that was never his fault. Was this truly a story of love, or was it a tale of greed, deception, and betrayal? Sophia and Sam had once shared a love that began in childhood, a bond that was meant to last forever. But somewhere along the way, that love was replaced by selfishness, lies, and an insatiable hunger for something more. Did Sophia ever love Sam at all? Or was he simply an obstacle, a barrier standing between her and the life she truly wanted? Was this about passion or power, desire or destruction? And in the end, did she really win? Because now, she sits behind prison walls. Her so-called love is lost. Her freedom is gone. And the son she could have raised will grow up knowing the truth about the mother who stole his father's life. A life destroyed for what? For a moment of passion? For a life built on deception? For a dream that was never meant to be? Maybe the real lesson here is that no matter how carefully a crime is planned, no matter how perfectly lies are told, the truth always finds a way to surface. And in the end, greed, betrayal, and selfishness will always lead to destruction. This was the story of Sam Abraham, a man who loved deeply, who trusted blindly, and who paid the ultimate price. What do you think? Was this love, or was this just pure greed? Let us know in the comments below. And if you found this case as shocking as we did, don't forget to subscribe to Crime Chronicles Confidential for more true crime stories that uncover the darkest corners of the human mind. Thank you for watching, and until next time, stay safe, stay aware, and never ignore the warning signs of betrayal.